an article about this several years ago in the Huffington Post, is the use of teaching children I want. There is a belief that if children will say what they want and you give it to them, you're going to encourage language development because they'll see that language pays. I have never, ever found that to be the case. And I can give you reasons why, but I will in a moment. But what I said was basically when you're doing that, you're setting up a contract with the child that if he says what he wants, he will get it. And then what happens, especially as the children get older, they start asking for things that you can't possibly give them. And what happens when you don't meet their request, they have violent temper tantrums. And now they're big. They're 14 or 15 years of age. They start hitting people. They start ripping pillows apart. They start banging the walls. And they're, in a sense, right, because you're breaking your contract. You said if you say what you want, you're going to get it. And it's so deep in people. There's a family I'm working with now, and the child doesn't speak. He reads and writes, and so we communicate with him that way. He can understand spoken language, though. And he often is resistant. He was allowed to be resistant for 6 years of training. And so it's taken us some time to help change that. But he was very sullen one day and wouldn't work. So they said to him, "Why won't you work?" And he says, "I don't like to." And so the father said, but he wrote it so nicely, "Why don't you give him what he wants?" And the father couldn't it would be totally counterproductive to give the child what he was requesting, because then all we'll have to do is say every day, "I don't want to work," and you're going to let him get away with it. And so there is this belief that if the child speaks nicely and makes his request nicely, it should be honored. What I teach parents to do, and this really upsets them at first, I said, you never give a child what he wants when he requests it. You give it to him at other times when he's in a good mood, when he's pleasant, when he's cooperative, when you know he likes it and it's a nice thing to do, but never as part of a contract of you say it and so you get it. And
we do that with typical kids.
Exactly.
And so it's all about relationship. Exactly. It's not about the things, and it's not about getting a result. It's about communication and about understanding each other.
Right. So but it has been, and now, for example, there is a huge industry in the field of autism, which involves augmentative devices, because children don't speak. And so the children get a device. Invariably, I've seen these devices used very effectively, for example, with children or individuals with cerebral palsy, because they want very much to communicate. They can't use their voice.
Yes, and they can't use their voice.
And the device is great. And so they write all kinds of things or put together ideas that are really interesting and useful and relevant and so on. Personally, I have never seen the device used with autistic children for other than I want. In other words, the child has to point or create a symbol or trigger a symbol or whatever of the thing he wants, and he's got to put together a sentence like, "I want apple," whether it's with symbols or pictures or whatever. And so I have never seen the augmentative devices used for anything other than I want. And I think that's a huge error that is causing enormous problems for the children and for their families.
Yeah, we did a couple interviews earlier this month on how to do testing of children of different spelling words using AAC devices. It was actually very fascinating, but in not using it in the context of I want.
Yeah. I've seen. Yeah.
But we do have a question from a viewer on this as well. So I'd like to put that up. She says, "I'm doing the ASD language book with my boys. Yeah. My son, who is functionally nonverbal, has some language, has a lot of trouble with two-part directions. He's been struggling for years. What do you recommend, and how do we proceed with AAC with your book instead of focusing on verbal production?" is what she
the thing, it'd be very hard unless they have some of the very advanced AAC devices to use unlocking language with a device. We use it very effectively when the children learn to read and write. In other words, if you want, for example, if you're a stage where he's imitating and you have a little figure of a cat and you say the cat is resting or something, he can write it. You say, write, the cat is resting, and he can write it. So I do less when I do it with writing because it's so much more time consuming. But you can do everything in the Unlocking Language book when the children have written language. It would be extremely hard with most augmentative devices, to use the really well-constructed grammar and sentence structure and so on that we're using in Unlocking Language. So in other words, you can do it without speaking, but you can't do it without written language.
Right, because you've got all those connecting words. And
exactly.
Usually AAC devices focus on the main verb, the main noun, and not the full syntax.
Exactly.
Yeah.